Let me go ahead and get situated here to go ahead and jump right into our live streaming. I'm a little late getting started. We are at a different location this evening and trying something different. As I was on the road already, I had to stop here at the library, and I said, well, let me just go ahead and do it remotely from the library and try to, just get it from that point of view. But forgive us, get ready to get started, and let's just do a quick prayer and then jump right in. Yahweh, Heavenly Father, we praise you, we honor you. Thank you for your love and your mercy and all that you have done, Father. Thank you for go out. May it address all those who are in need of information, understanding, and learning. Father, may your word filter and just give nourishment to those who are hungry, desiring to be fed. This prayer we pray in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Yahweh, our Creator. Hallelujah. And so, as I said, I'm in a different venue this evening, so I don't want to speak too loud, so you may notice that my voice is at very minimum. And so I'm going to keep it that way for this teaching. And hopefully you can hear and understand everything that I'm speaking. So our topic this evening is going to be on the Sabbath, and the title is called Sabbath, What If? Sabbath, what if? You fill in the what if. What if the Sabbath is true? What if Yahweh's words are true? How would we fare in judgment to Yahweh's words? And so, as the flying scroll that is spoken of in the scriptures, it says in the 5th chapter of, I'll have to think on that, but it says in the flying scroll will stop in every home or visit every home. And so we're all being judged by the Torah or the commandments. And so as we're going to a main focus, which is on Sabbath, I'm going to go through a few different points of view. And so once again, I want to go back to my topic, and I have a PowerPoint on the side where you'll see me looking. I'm working from that so that I can stay on point. So what if Yahweh's words are true? So here's some questions I want to try to answer. To whom does Sabbath law apply? Is profaning the Sabbath a sin? If so, what is the penalty? Buying and selling on the Sabbath. So different issues I'm going to address. And so let's just go ahead and answer as we could. We have 4 questions. So to whom does the Sabbath laws apply? And so you can study up on the Sabbath in the commandments, Exodus chapter 19 and 20 and 21 and so on, actually. Book of Numbers, Deuteronomy. Different books will give you a perspective of the Sabbath. But Leviticus chapter 20 will give you a history of each of the holies led off by the weekly Sabbath belongs. It says, to you, nor your manservant, your female servant, your ox, your animals, everything gets a Sabbath. And so that's critical for us to know that everything gets a Sabbath. But do we obey that law? Know that Yahweh's commandments are true. And when he says 6 days you can work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath unto Yahweh. who does it really belong to? It belongs to Yahweh, but he has given it to us. And I understand you may be thinking about um, man not made for the Sabbath, or Sabbath not made for man, but man, and I have that backwards. Sabbath is not made for man, but Sabbath for man. You know what I'm talking about. Man wasn't created, and the Sabbath being created for man to be obligated other than a will to serve Yahweh. So if we break the commands um, against us, it is just like any other sin. It's against us. But man wasn't created for the Sabbath. Sabbath was created for man and given to man, but it belongs to Yahweh. Scripture says that Messiah, Yeshua, is what? The master of the Sabbath. And so to whom does it apply? It applies to everyone. Greek, neither Greek, neither Israel, Hebrew, all, free, slave, uh, male or female, everyone just the same, it applies to each of us. And so is profaning the Sabbath a sin? To get right to the answer. Profaning the Sabbath is a sin. And so if we profane, um, it says that it's a law forever. And so let's go to the next question. If so, what is the penalty? Death. Let's keep it simple. Death. So what is the penalty for sin, period? Death. Um, if there was no law, there would be no sin. But because there is a law, there is a law that um, wins. And so buying and selling on the Sabbath, this one has gotten away from us a long time ago. And so most denominations, most churches, is that profaning the Sabbath to work and to benefit far as profiting on the Sabbath is against the Torah. And so this day was taught in the wilderness where they would not pick up sticks. And so we know about the man who did pick up sticks, and the question was asked to Moshe, what should be done? And Moshe went and said, let me go and ask you. I said, what is written? Then stone him. And so is the law. And because we no longer are stoning today, we still have that law that is written forever. And so let's continue to move. And so let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1 through 5. Now, brothers, as to the time and seasons, you do not need to be written to, for you yourselves know the day of Yahweh comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then suddenly destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But brothers, look at the two audiences here, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief, for you are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. And so right here, just looking at, now this is New Testament, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, it says that you do not need to be, first he addresses his audience, brothers. Who is writing? This is Shaul, Paul. He's speaking to his brothers as to the times and seasons. And so this is key because as a Hebrew, we understand the Sabbath. There's also annual Sabbath. These are what we call the holy days. The Sabbath comes once a week, but then there's also annual Sabbath, and heard of Passover. So we go from Passover to unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks, First Fruits Feast of Weeks, Yom Teruah, which is the calling of the bride, Yom Kippur, which is the cleaning of the bride, and the Feast of Sukkot, which is the feast and the wedding chamber where the bride goes away with the bridegroom. And so this is what we're waiting on. And so he says, but you, brothers, are not in the dark. And so right here we have a split audience that Shaul was speaking to. And so one group, he says, you are not as others. And so you know yourselves very well that the as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them. And so he's saying, why? Because you know the times and the seasons. That's what he opened up with. He said, there's no need for me to write to you out the times nor the seasons, because this is what we know very well. This is what we live and do. And so we live by it. And so there's no need for us to be written to, is what Shaul said. And so going to Luke chapter 12, verse 35 through 42, I know some of you may say, well, no man knows the day nor the hour. And of course, we're speaking of the return of the Messiah. So let's look at this verse, Luke chapter 12, verse 35 through 42. Let your loins be girded, lamps burning, and be like men waiting for their master, when he shall return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they open to him immediately. Blessed be those servants whom the master, when he comes, shall find watching. Truly I say to you, that he shall gird himself and make them sit down to eat, and shall come and serve them. And if he comes in the second watch or in the third watch and find them so, blessed are those servants. This, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief comes, he would have watched and not allowed his house into. And you then be ready, for the sons of Adam is coming at an hour you do not expect. And Kepha, Peter, said to him, Master, do you speak this parable to us or also to all? And the master said, who then is the trustworthy and wise manager, whom his master shall appoint over his household to give the portion of food? Now, let's look at this. As we started, we're answering another profound statement and question that may be the day nor the hour, the coming of the Son of Adam. And so we know that scripture very well, which is coming out of Matthew's chapter 24, verse 36. And so we know that people will quote that and saying, no man knows the day nor the hour. But we have time that we know very well. And isn't that how we started out in First Thessalonians chapter 5? And so let me back up, actually. Let me throw in there First Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16, where it says, the master himself shall come down from the heavens of the trump of the archangel. And so this is one of the things that we know. There's a particular time, and I mentioned it already, which is Yom Teruah, which is the call of the bride. And so with the call of the bride, these are the times and the seasons that Shaul was saying, I have no need to write to you concerning, because this is what we practice every year. There are 7 major holy days that we do. Go to the book of Leviticus chapter 23, and you will find them all there, beginning with the weekly Sabbath, and then 6 other holy days that are following through. And so right here, though, I'm going to stay with Luke chapter 12. Keep let your loins be girded and your lamps burning, and be like men waiting for their master when he shall return from the wedding. And if you remember, I mentioned a wedding. And so these are key words for us. I'm going to just go ahead and hit some of those key words again. Wedding, that's code for us. We understand it. We know every year when we practice for the wedding. And then it says that when he comes and knocks, they open to him immediately. Another key word, because they are waiting at a certain time of the year for the Messiah to return. And so every year there's a watch, which comes on Yom Teruah, which is the call of the bride. There's several stages that we go through with the sighting of the moon and the notification of the other camps that says, and of course I'm going way back to say how we did it, but today we still do the same thing, but we use technology. So everyone is alerted as to it's time for the feast to begin. Now, we don't come together to watch the skies or the full moon or the crescent moon or when to begin our feast to watch for the Messiah. We do it because we are commanded to keep the feast. Just like during the time when they gathered in Jerusalem and Yeshua was being crucified, they didn't go there to see him crucified, neither did they go there to see him raised up, but they went there because year they go to Jerusalem during the feast to observe the feast. And so this is why Shaul even said, Paul said, keep the feast. Why? Because it's a thing to come. So let me move on from here. I don't want to run out of time. So it says, blessed are those whom the master, when he comes, shall find watching. What do we do during Yom Teruah? We watch. There's a particular we're watching for the new moon, the very first of the new moon, and then 10 days later we get ready for what we call mikvah, or some call baptism, and we cleanse ourselves. And this may be only tradition, but the bride cleanses herself. She goes through the atonement. And we know that Messiah was the atonement for us, but we know that there's 3 witnesses still in the earth, which is the Spirit, the water, and the blood. So we go into the water in an effort to spiritually prepare ourselves to get ready for our master. If he comes, so be it. If he don't, we're still waiting. We're going through the cleansing process every year to wait for our Messiah, because we know that one day he is going to return just as he promised. And so that's what the instructions are saying here. Blessed is he who is found watching and doing what? The holy days, the commandments of Yahweh. And so here, let me just continue to move through this. It says that he shall gird himself and make them sit down to eat. That's the wedding feast. I'm telling you, these words are coded understanding for us. And it says, and he shall serve them. Blessed are those servants who are found doing when the master comes. And so he says, know this, that comes what's about the thief who comes at a time when he's not expected, because if the master of the house knew when he was coming, he would not be able to break into his house. And so he tells us to be ready. He says, don't know whether he shall come in the first watch or the second watch or the third watch. And so in this, what is he saying? No man knows the day nor the hour. And so we don't wait for a specific time. We do this every week and every year for the annual holy days, which are also Sabbath, um, barring one, which is Passover. It is not a Sabbath, but 24 hours later, you're going into the Sabbath. And so, this vein with no man knows. And so, 12, verse 54 through 56. And he also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising out of the west, immediately you say, a storm is coming. And so it is. And when you see wind blow, you say, there shall be hot weather, and it is. And Yeshua right there cut into him. And he said, hypocrites, you know to discern the face of heaven and of the earth, but how you know to discern the time? And so, so many people say, no man knows the day nor the hour. They're actually convinced that no man knows the day nor the hour. And here it is, Luke chapter 12, verse 54 through 56 says the opposite. He says, how is it that you understand the face of heavens? You can predict the weather and it happens, but you cannot predict the coming of the Son of Man. And so there's something wrong with that. It says that we should know and understand by the signs and wonders that he has given us. And that's true. No man knows the day nor the hour. But what he has given us is ours, Proverbs belongs to us and to our children forever. And so he has given us enough information that if we are obedient to, then we would be in the right place at the right time. And so no man knows the day nor the hour. We need to tighten up on that because it is for us to know the times and seasons. And this is what Shaul was saying to you. He said, no need for me to write to you concerning the time nor the season. And so let's go ahead and discern chapter 7, verse 21 through 24. Daniel chapter 7, verse 21 through 24. I was looking, and this horn was fighting against the set apart ones and prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came, and right ruling was given to the set apart ones of the Most High. And the time came, the set apart ones took possession of the reign. This is what he said. The fourth beast is the fourth reign on earth, which is different from all other reigns. And it devours all the earth, tramples it down, and crushes it. And the 10 horns are 10 sovereigns or 10 kings from this reign. They shall rise, and another shall rise after them. And it is different from the first ones, and it humbles 3 sovereigns. And so in this, Daniel, he is being told by the messengers of heaven. Yahweh sent out, dispatched messengers to go give a message, which is why we call them messengers. Give to Daniel concerning the time of Yeshua's coming. And so Daniel knew this, that the time of Babylon was the beginning and the time of Rome was the end of a certain time period, but there would be another after them. Now, Rome was the top, Babylon was the head, and then Mede and Persia was and I'm going to the fourth reign through the statue of Daniel. So you can see this in the second chapter of Daniel and throughout. But this is Daniel's dream, which actually was Nebuchadnezzar. He saw the statue, and Daniel had to interpret, and Yahweh gave him also the dream. And so here it is. Babylon was the head of gold, And Persia/Mede through those years became or are the breast of silver, that was Greece. And then the fourth reign, dominating culture, which is the legs or are the legs of iron. And then Rome fell. And once Rome fell, they was restored, but 10 reigns came out of Rome. And so they split into 10 reigns. And so what we have is the feet of iron and clay. And so we know that right here, which is the fifth reign, where the comes out of the mountain and topples the statue, and the statue then falls, and the 10 of Rome falls as well. But let's go through those 10 dominant, which is alive today, that we can, most of them anyway. But Germany, and I'm going to use their names that we know of today: Germany, France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and England. That's seven of the 10. And then I'll use the old names that you can look up: Vandals, and then Ostrogoths, and Heruel, which those three are now extinct. And so looking at those nations, we still know most of those nations, at least 7 of them are still around today. And so I think the statue of Daniel is still valid to this very day. And so chapter 7, Daniel chapter 7, verse 25 through 28. Yeshua said, "Why call me master and you don't do the things that I say?" And so let's look into that, looking at Daniel chapter 7, verse 20. And it speaks words against the Most High, and it wears out the set apart ones of the Most High, and it intends to change appointed times and laws. Appointed times. Those are the times that Shaul said, "No need for me to write to you because you know very well." All right. So, and they are given into his hands for time and times and half a time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away its rule to cut off and to destroy until the end. And the reign and the rulership and the greatness of the reign under all the heavens shall be given to the people, and the set apart ones are the Most High. His reign is an everlasting reign, and all rulership shall serve, and all rulerships. Let me make sure that you're hearing that correct. All governments, that's what that's saying, shall serve and obey him. This is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, and I kept the matter in my heart. And so right here, what I want to bring out of this is where Yeshua is saying, "Why call me master? And why are you not obeying?" And so here's how we begin to decipher this, where it says, "It speaks words against the Most High." What is the it? I want to go to the biggest part of it, which is Hasatan, Satan, the devil. So he manifests his prophet, or many people call him the Antichrist, or the lawless one, the one who is against Messiah, Yeshua. And so he is the anti-Messiah, lawless one. And so it speaks words against the Most High. And I want to go right to it. And this is where we get our Catholic Church, not to browbeat or offend people, begin to start opening our eyes to begin to understand that Pope, who is now saying very openly that we waited 2,000 years, and we shall not wait any longer, because it's been 2,000 years and apparently he's not coming back. And it must be the wine that he drunk to make such a promise and not keep. And so that's just an example of what it speaks against the Most High. He says we're no longer the commandment or the law of adultery. And so that one right there, we need to be up in arms over that, because man, woman, it doesn't matter. Adultery is still very much in the scriptures, whereas the Pope has now taken that out, deleted that one. And he's actually, let me just summarize this. He's taken out, there's 10 commandments. He's taken out 2 of them, rewritten most of them, and one of them he just took out altogether, which is adultery. And so he said that Yahweh has commanded him to, and gave him authority to rewrite the commandments. Now, this is the Mount Sinai covenant. What man has the right to take down the Mount Sinai covenant and to rewrite it? And so this is what we're talking about. And so we know that there's coming a time that all nations will serve him. And so this is what he's saying, that all rulerships shall serve and obey. And so let's go into this a little bit more. And so let's look at the Sabbath laws that are forever. And so I'm going to use Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29 through 32. And we could have started back in Genesis, where the Sabbath starts, really, chapter 1 on the 7th day, when he created the Sabbath, going into chapter 2. But I want to show something here, because Leviticus, I get to show both the annual and the weekly Sabbath are forever. And so it says in Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29 through 32, and this shall be for you a law forever. In the 7th new moon, on the 10th day of the new moon, you afflict your being, and you do no work. The native or the stranger who sojourns among you, for on that day he makes atonement for you, to cleanse you, to be clean from all your sins before Yahweh. It is a Sabbath of rest for you, and you shall afflict your beings a law forever. And the priest who is anointed and ordained to serve as priest in his father's place shall make atonement on the linen garment, the set apart garments. And so right here, it says the 7th new moon, or the 7th month, on the 10th day, you afflict your being. Now, as I was speaking about the 7 holy days, I mentioned the Day of Atonement, which is on the 10th day of the 7th month of the Hebrew calendar, and not the general civil calendar of the nations, but the Hebrew calendar. And so that is the Day of Atonement. And so this is what we know very well. And it says this is a law forever. It is a Sabbath of rest for you. You afflict your being, a law forever. And so what we see here, the Sabbath is forever. The holy days are forever. And so I'll come in with the weekly Sabbath as well, but I'm going to keep it moving so that we can view even the weekly Sabbath. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 7 through says today. And so we look back during the time they spent in the wilderness, but now we are in modern time. And so let's look at and compare and see. He says, therefore, as the set apart today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion in the day of trial, in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore I was grieved with that generation and said, they always go astray heart, and they have not known my ways. As I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest. Verse 12 through 15, look, lest there be in any of you a wicked belief in falling away from the living Elohim, but encourage one another daily while it is called day today, lest any of you be hardened by the deceivableness of sin. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning trust firm to the end, while it is said, today, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart as in the rebellion. Rebellion. What rebellion? In the wilderness. This is why I wanted to bring in Leviticus 16, because you'll get a chance to see both the weekly Sabbath as we observe it today on the seventh day, which is Saturday, the seventh day. And then there's the annual holy days that can come in any day of the week. And so you can have more than one, and we do have more than one Sabbath the week, because we have the two Sabbaths, the front Sabbath of the first of the 7 days and the last of the 7 days are both Sabbath. And then there's the weekly Sabbath that could fall anywhere in between those two. And so you can have up to 2 or 3 Sabbaths one week. And so the unbelief is what uh, uh, is what separates us. And so many people say, I believe, but what about obedience to what you believe? And so I want to say that demons believe and they tremble, but they're not obedient to the master. And so this is what we're saying now, is that we must become obedient to Yahweh's word, his command, and live according to his laws and right ruling and traditions. And so today, he says, still so many generations later, if you hear his voice, we must believe. Verse 16 through 19, for who having heard rebelled, was it not all who came out of Mizraim or Egypt, led by Moses, and with whom was the grief 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter into his rest, but to those who did not obey? So we see that they were unable to enter in because of unbelief. And so those who said they believed didn't. And so one way or the other, we're not completing the sinless where it is called upon us to believe and obey. Once you belief is the simplest of the two. And I said that for this reason, that you can come to belief in an instant, but once you come into belief, now it calls for obedience. I want to cite the two brothers on the stake or the cross that was crucifixion. He simply just said, look, today you will be with me, to the one who said he believed. And so not in those exact words, but he asked, if when you go into your father's kingdom, me, that's all he asked him. And Yeshua said to him, today me in my father's kingdom. And so the other brother on the other side said that if you be the master, then save yourself and us with you. And so the conversation between the two, we are guilty, but he is not. And so just paraphrasing is showing that here was belief that kicked in, but did he have time for the obedience part to keep the Sabbath and to do all those other things, such as eating correctly, loving your brother as yourself, and all the things, all the commandments. He didn't have time for that. He's dying today and tonight. His soul is required. And so this is what I'm talking about. The simplest of the two is to believe, but then we must obey. And so this is where our journey begins. And so still, so many did not enter into the place of promise because they were, and they tried Yahweh and they did not believe. They did not believe or obey. And so that first generation, that whole first generation outside of two, did not make it into that promised land. And so Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering into his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed the good news was brought to us, to them. Notice the two different audiences. To them, this is Hebrews, which is New Testament, and I'm speaking of Old Testament, but the good news was brought to them as well as to us. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not having been mixed with belief in those who heard it. We who have believed do enter into that rest, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall enter into my rest. And yet his work have come into being from the foundation of the world. Genesis. For somewhere he has said thus about the seventh day, and Elohim rested on the seventh day from all his works. And in this again, if they shall enter into my rest. And so he says to you today, will you enter into that rest? How do we enter? First, through belief. Obedience in the walking out in step, day by day, proves what we believe. And so remember when we spoke a couple of verses back, I want to go back where it speaks about in the Father's name. And so it says, to whom did he swear that they would not enter into his rest? But to those who did not obey. And so as Yeshua, and I'm just actually trying to see exactly that verse that speaks concerning coming in the Father's name. It says, for we who have believed do enter, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest. And yet his work have come into being from the foundation of the world. For somewhere he has said thus about the seventh day, and Elohim rested on the seventh day from all his work. And in this, again, if you shall enter into that rest. In those days is the one I was going after. If days command that we come into the Sabbath rest and we obey, um, then you will be atoned for. And so who put on his father's garments as a priest, but Yeshua will now return as the Father tells him to come back and receive his bride. And so catching back up, Nehemiah chapter 13, verse through 17. In those days, I saw in Judah those trading wine press, excuse me, treading the wine press on the Sabbath and bringing in sheaves as with wine, grapes, and figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I warned them on the day they sold Zor, dwelt there, bringing in fish and all kinds of goods, and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Yehuda and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Yehuda and said to them, what evil matters is this that you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Now we're going to get further into that profaning the Sabbath. And so I want you to understand right here is where he's saying, come out of her, my people, because you have to make a decision now. But I want you to see what took place back during Nehemiah's time. And it says, Nehemiah chapter 13, we're still in chapter 13, verse 17 through 21. Did not our fathers do the same so that our Elohim brought all this evil on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to be, when the gates of Jerusalem were shaded before the Sabbath, that I commanded the door, Nehemiah, and commanded that they should not be opened until after the Sabbath. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. And the merchants and the sellers of all kinds of uh, wares spent the night outside Jerusalem on uh, and I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I lay hands on you from that time on or on the Sabbath. And so they came to sell on the Sabbath, and they even spent the night waiting for the Sabbath, waiting for Jerusalem to open up so that they can sell on the Sabbath again. And so he spoke against this again, and it said, he gave another command and said, when Jerusalem had of Sabbath coming in, meaning the night before, when the Sabbath come in the evening, when the darkness is coming in, close the gates. Therefore, when the sun is down, Sabbath comes in. And so the evening of Sabbath comes before the day of Sabbath. So in the evening and then in the morning is the first day. And so now in the evening and in the morning is the seventh day. And so on Friday night, we observe sundown, Sabbath coming in till Saturday evening, sundown. And so for a 24-hour period, we observe the Sabbath, Sabbath night, then Sabbath day. And so we can see that here, profaning the Sabbath. And he said, look, if you come back again, I'm going to have to lay hands on you. And so from that time, he said, they came back no more. And so Nehemiah wasn't playing with them. But right here in Revelation, it says, come out of her, my people. So we today get to make a choice. We don't have a priest standing over us saying to come out of her or to lock the gates. Each of us can make that choice ourselves. And so we're shaded before the Sabbath. And so that is a Hebrew word, which is H6751. H6751. And it is Salal, Tsalal, is the Hebrew word. And it means to be or to become or grow dark. And so I just want to clarify that when he locked the doors, it was becoming dark. And in becoming dark, the evening was setting in. And so it is now time for Sabbath rest. And so that first generation did not enter into a Sabbath rest. And so it was the second generation who was able to go into the land. But we know that more than 1,500 years later, is coming in, being birthed into the land, and not long after, then Israel is demolished, burnt down for a second time. First time by Babylon. We went through the time frame. And then the second time, which was 70 AD, by Rome. And since that time, around 450, 450 and 500 AD, not even that far in, Rome fell. And so, again, Rome revised as 10 nations working together, but it was iron and clay, which is fit. And so the stone will come and topple that statue, guaranteed. But until then, we keep the Sabbath and proclaim it. Until then, we keep the holy days and proclaim them. And so this is what we know very well. Leviticus chapter 23. Read it, study it. And if you have any questions, please write into us. You can hit me on the chat line. I can't see them at the time, but after I cut off, I'll be able to indulge in any chat be out there. And perhaps if my wife or any others who are out there also watching may be able to respond instantly. But I'll also be able to get back to you with time. So please, whatever questions you may have, go ahead and enter them. The Sabbath is a major controversy, and so many people try to figure out, well, when is the Sabbath? And straight out with that, it was the Catholic Church, and the question was asked through different theological, Christian and different theological seminaries, asking you the authority to change the Sabbath. And the answer was a few times where they answered, they said, by the authority of every denomination that followed us into as Sabbath. And so the rules and regulations that govern the Sabbath have also sunk into the shadows, because if you don't study the holy days and the Sabbath, you don't know what the regulations are concerning them. And so what through the Vatican, they have made them very weighty. And so many people, through the traditions of the Pharisees and the scribes, and then the Roman Church or Roman Catholic Church also kicking in with tradition, made them so very weighty that people couldn't do this. And this is why Yeshua said, you have made them too weighty and people can't do this. And he wasn't speaking of the laws that Yahweh has given us. There's 5 different oral laws, all different titles. One is called the Mishnah. Looking at the Mishnah, it had like 39 laws to it by itself. And so we're not governed by that many laws when it comes to the Sabbath day. We are to refrain from work. We are to gather, and there's a couple others that I can't think of at the moment, but as I think of them, we are closing it down. We're getting ready to close down, and so as we do the Sabbath, we must do them according to what Yahweh says and not man. And so I'm going to go ahead and call this the end right here. If you have any questions, please, you know, enter those questions, and I'll do my best to get back to you. But we're going to say shalom for this evening. Thank you so very much. And once again, from a remote area, thank you. This is Rabbi Byers, representing Melo HaGoyim. And thanks again to Lamb Ministries for allowing us an opportunity to take part in what they have afforded. Shalom and good night.